We are connected to every species that's ever existed on this planet genetically. So there's a continuum. There's no sharp distinction between culture and nature. If culture is...
Well, of course there is, Matt, because there's a sharp distinction between intelligence that is fulfilling its natural selection purpose, which is to make us better consumers and reproducers, and intelligence that can go way beyond that purpose, that can analyze its own creator, that can be self-aware and be capable of scrutinizing its creator, of scrutinizing its reality. It's, again, I will make the simple argument, there's no natural selection is not in charge of intelligence, okay? The intelligence is in charge of intelligence over time. We do see it. It does evolve. We do become more aware. We do discover more facts, and those facts don't get unwritten. Okay, we're never going to go back to living on a flat earth, Matt. That's not going to happen. Zeus is not going to be reborn. All right, we do, over time, get rid of the intellectual rubbish, and the more enlightened perspective tends to win the day. So over time, we will be enlightened if we can survive this period in time when we're still clinging to the animal, still clinging to nature, because that will destroy us. I mean, if we can't get past being the natural animal, then we won't have a future.
You know, certain behaviors that are inherited. Lots of animals have culture. So my argument was that if we view evolution as a completely purposeless process, then human existence is just as purposeless, because there's a continuum there. So we have to...
Well, ultimately, again, I'll say it, that is true. And we are not going to create something that's going to make the universe, going to validate the universe or validate the existence of life. But what we can do is correct, we can fix, we can do selection, we can do a natural influence, whatever you want to call it. We can be a controller that is much better than nature as a controller, or natural selection as a controller, because it doesn't have any ethics, it doesn't have any conscience, it doesn't have any capacity to understand the value of sentience, its vulnerability, or anything else. It has no capacity to make a value judgment beyond consumption and reproduction and survival. It made a mess. We can fix the mess. So we can have a mission and a usefulness, but ultimately, beyond being a mess cleaner-upper, a fixer, yeah, we can't have a purpose, because the universe doesn't need us, okay? The universe doesn't compel the existence of us. There's nothing to be accomplished. You cannot do without creating the thing that needs to be done first, the necessity. And it's just a fact of reality that it doesn't need to play the game.
Human beings are just one stop along a way that's continuing. But arriving, at least at this point, at human beings with this very complex, intense form of consciousness, which has developed.
It's just an eccentric, all right? The complexity is just eccentricity to suit us to a niche. Like animals, like a long-beaked woodpecker or some other. It's just a molding of us to an environment. So we have this elaborate psychology, but it's still the same thing. It's just a longer beak. It's just faster legs. It's a longer tail. It's whatever the feature is that suits you to this biological mission of survival. And to talk as if there is, like I said, without intellect, there's no progress for the biology. The biology has nowhere to go. The only thing that can progressively advance is intelligence. And even it ultimately can't contrive purpose. It can't contrive a use for a human being once everything is fixed. If there's no broken, there's nothing for a human being to do. And that's our ultimate destiny, if we can, like I say, survive it. And all organisms are trapped in the same game. They're all chasing their tail, Matt. Whether it's a bacterium, well, that they're not really doing it. You know, I mean, I'm not going to concede any consciousness in a bacterium. But let's just go through, you know, the flatworm or any organism that has a developed nervous system is just doing the tail chasing game. They're just doing what they're commanded to do to satisfy the mission of a DNA molecule. And it's just, they're just chasing a tail. It's an illusion. Need has been injected into them, then they are compelled to serve the need. But the need never needed to be injected.
Unless we repurpose in it from the beginning, nothing we consider human is real. It's just an illusion. We're robots and we're determined by our genes.
Yeah, well, that's, again, you just simplify it, you just write us off as robots. There's this important thing that was created through the process of evolution, and it didn't start at the beginning. It came about relatively, from our perspective, around the middle of sentience. Okay, it changed everything. This idea of feelings changes the game. All right, because now there's something valuable. Now there's this thing called need. All right, you don't need to worry about a plant. You don't need to worry about a bacterium. It can live and die. It can blow up. It can do anything, and it doesn't fucking matter. Okay, as our intelligence knows, it's completely irrelevant. It's like an asteroid blowing up. It doesn't mean anything. It only means something when there's a feeling organism, a vulnerable organism, to be harmed by it. So without this capacity to be harmed, you know, there isn't any meaning. But there is a huge meaning once that capacity exists in an organism. Once it can be harmed, okay, sentiently, sensually, that's the reality. That is meaningful. That creates need in the universe. That creates a necessity, a mandate, a requirement that be compensated for, number one, that there be something of value to justify the existence of that negative, but that negative by its very self compels, demands attention. Sentience is a significant change in biology.
You can't have it both ways. You can't say evolution is this blind process ruled by selfish genes and then say human culture is somehow different. It's not. Even
it is, though, Matt. So you know, you can yammer all you want. Our human culture is not just a psychological aberration anymore. All right, it's not. It's dictated by intelligence. Knowledge changes culture. Knowledge changes how we live. Knowledge changes the environment we live in. Knowledge growth is not the same as our psychology or our biology. Those things have been dictated by natural selection. Knowledge isn't obeying those rules.
And if you're talking about mimetics, mimetics are just the same selfish gene theory applied to ideas instead of molecules in our cells. But it functions the same way. It's just as blind a process, just as mechanical, just as robotic.
But it isn't, Matt, and you know it, because it doesn't require an intercourse. It doesn't require consumption. It doesn't require a lot of things that biology requires to survive into the future. Ideas survive, and there is this progressive scale. I mean, it does. The improvement is obvious. The improvement of the human organism is not obvious, okay, biologically. The improvement of our understanding is obviously progressive.
So hopefully you understand where I'm coming from a little better now at some points in your response.
You know, you talk about psychology. Again, you won't separate psychology from an informed intelligence. And responsibility, obviously, we are programmed, we are a product of our culture, we are a product of our conditioning, we are a product of our exposure to knowledge and wisdom and understanding. But certainly to function on just a rudimentary level, there's this base amount of innate logic. I mean, it's innately logical, all right? The brain has been created to be a logically functioning device. And the only way somebody can be a villain or irresponsible or a criminal or do something bad, effectively, the obvious bads, is they have to completely break that logic. They have to completely ignore what the rational mind is telling them and be a slave to their impulses. And they're right there, that is just such a broken brain that we can pass the simple judgment to say that's broken programming. That's one fucked up motherfucker if they can't figure out these simple principles of what they have a right to do and what they don't have a right to do. So in that sense, they can be held responsible only, to the extent that you say this is programming that is dysfunctional and it shall not be supported. It shall not be liberated. And that's what we do as a society, and we do it in the context that there is purpose in applying a punishment as it deters others from committing the same stupid, ignorant, dumb behavior.
Another year and a half of this, we'll come to some kind of agreement.
Yeah, well, it might take, who knows? There's no prospect of it happening anytime soon. I understood what you said. You obviously don't understand what I'm saying, because you just keep arguing that you can't comprehend the universe. That doesn't start with purpose. And I think I've explained it doesn't have to have a purpose in its origin to create something that is purposeful in the end. But the purpose is always going to be limited.